Hello, and welcome to this episode of Inside Legal ESG. My name is Pamela Cohn, and I am pleased to be hosting this podcast series. Our featured guest today is Paola Fonseca. She is a prominent ESG lawyer based in Costa Rica with over 15 years expertise as in-house counsel in ESG. She's also a global board member of GAIL, which is the Global Alliance of Impact Lawyers, and she represents the Latin American region on that board. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paula. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you for inviting me, Pamela.
So let's start at the very beginning. Tell me about your career and how you came to work in ESG space.
As you mentioned a little bit earlier, I worked for 15 years as an in-house counsel. I loved working at the company that I was working for at the time. And then the company got bought by a large fund that was a signatory of the PRI, the Principles for Responsible Investment. And they told the company that they had to engage in some sort of ESG standard or ranking. And that was an amazing journey. Since I had been with the company for a long time, I raised my hand and I said, I would love to be part of that project. The company had so much potential. And then I fell in love with it. I fell in love with all the company has offices in more than 80 countries, more than 150 cities. And just the context of each one of the offices and what they could do, because they wanted to do a lot of things, but sometimes it was more about what they could do, was great. From a governance perspective, the company renders corporate compliance services, so governance was strong. But figuring out what type of social and environmental standard was appropriate for being able to contribute, that was different. And then I decided to sort of like make a complete career turn, and I started a PhD to understand, to understand how could public policy be promoted in order for small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, for them to be able to comply with ESG and attract better type of investment, impact investment, or so on. And over there, I learned a lot about understanding how all of these standards can be or should apply or are a opportunity bottom up rather than just top down. And that's how come I came to understand, ground up and bottom up. And now the rest is history. You learn so much. Right now, there are a lot of regulations, mostly from the European Union, but also from Latin American countries and other countries in the world that are establishing standards. So it's an exciting time for lawyers, all of the lawyers listening to this, to grasp the opportunity to be a change maker while also just being a good professional and executing your career, right? But with this embracing this new opportunity ESG brings along.
So I want to have the audience understand a little bit more about the Global Alliance of Impact Lawyers. I'm familiar with your organization, but tell us more about it and how did you get involved with them?
I got involved with them, with as with all of the great things that come to your life. A friend of mine recommended it. I don't know if she's ever been in these podcasts. She probably has. Her name's Constanza Connolly. Yes, yes, she has been here.
Yes.
Well, there were different networks of lawyers that were trying to use their knowledge in order to communicate and create positive impact in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in the United States, and also in Latin America. About 3 years ago, these networks came together and decided to create a global alliance. That is why it's called the Global Alliance of Impact Lawyers. And Connie didn't knock on my door. She, rang my phone and said, Paola, I think you will, you can share so much knowledge over there, and you can, find great, amazing lawyers that think the way you do, and that is that's what has happened. It's an amazing network of professionals globally. I've met people from every region in the world who I can ask advice or their points of view. But also we've created a very strong group within the Latin American board that's driving on this because one of the exciting opportunities that are occurring right now is that since the world is so intertwined, everything is just so well connected. Us as Latin Americans need to understand how all of these standards and regulations impact us, but we cannot just talk about I'm based in Costa Rica, just Costa Rica, or just one country or the other. We have to be all together, and then we do share a cultural narrative. We share common, even the way our legal systems are structured, regarding civil law, and the regulations very similar. But then it's not only about us uniting ourselves as Latin Americans, but also aiming to communicate this to the global audience. For example, I mentioned a little bit earlier on Europe and how Europe's, to quote one regulation, the CSDDD, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, how this is having an important impact across Latin America. So GAIL is this global network, right, of lawyers that want to share mostly knowledge, okay, and also network to see how we can support this and create a positive change. And from a Latin American perspective, we have our local Latin American projects, but we also try to bring the voice from Latin America to a wider audience.
Sounds like wonderful work. I'm sure you're happy to be involved with them. So tell me, what are you seeing as the hottest emerging trends around ESG in Costa Rica and beyond?
Well, ESG, let me just step, let me not start with the hottest, but I've always mentioned that ESG or sustainability, this is not new, okay? So we've always had to comply with some type of social standard, environmental standard, or governance. Governance, perhaps 30 years ago, people were talking about FCPA or the UK Anti-Bribery Act. And then we were talking regarding governance within the likes of data. We should protect data and GDPR and all of these regulations, right? Then, depending on the industry that you were linked with, environment was something that you had to comply with certain specific aspects, right? If you were researching, or if you were an oil and gas company or so on, there were specific gatekeepers that you had to comply with. And also, if you think about even the CSDDD, 80% of it is human rights compliance, and then we've had human rights for decades and decades and decades. So ESG is not new, but the whole term has become hot. Okay. And it is something that's sort of like understood, right? That right now it is not only about ESG, it's about ESG, and all of them being able to connect to each other in order to deliver on something. Okay, so great that we have a hot term, not an old concept. Now, what has been, or what I believe has sort of like pushed this ESG to be now a hot trend. So there are two sort of like main avenues of sort of, I won't call them knowledge, right, that are pushing there. Now, first, consumers and governments, are now more aware about the fact that these incredibly important actors of our society, which are companies, large, huge companies, right, that they have an impact. It is not only about what the government can do or how the government can regulate you or what are the standards that you need to comply with, but the fact that you and a large enterprise has corporate social responsibility. And over here, I'm not talking about the corporate social responsibility term on, let's go paint some schools and help some kids.
Right.
The actual academic term, this is me with my PhD hat, the actual theory behind corporate responsibility, and it is the fact that you are an individual in a society creating social progress, and how you deliver that social progress has consequences, positive ones and others that might not be that positive. So that's the first thing, awareness. Okay. And then the second one is that this awareness eventually created the fact that there had to be, I call them black and white guidance, right? And then this black and white guidance has come in several different forms, certifications, standards, or regulation. Okay. So again, not a new term, but not a new concept, but a new term that's being pushed by these two trends, right? An awareness, okay, of us as consumers or companies as actors, important actors of society, and then also the fact that governments are now regulating on this. Now, these trend, right? It's great, but how do you ground it within legal, right? Or how do you ground it for this podcast, legal ESG, right? And I have this term, I always joke on it, but I think it reflects so much. And it's like, legal is not sexy, but you cannot be sexy without legal. Right? So if there's a regulatory barrier out there, right, that does not allow you to engage with a third party in the way that you want to engage with that third party, then you need to contact a legal professional to help you enable how can that occur, okay? And that's where lawyers are now enablers. You might be an in-house person working for an organization. You're still enabling your company in order to do something. And if you have knowledge regarding ESG, you can advise them on having perhaps more fair contractual terms, or trying to, I want to use the word educate, on what's the point of departure on this. And then the company can decide whatever they want to decide. But if you're an in-house, you can still voice out your opinion in order for that to be considered and let the directors decide. If you are working for a law firm, then you have the opportunity to advise your client and share with them what are the potential risks. Because another word that we have not mentioned in this podcast is that this whole ESG thing is basically risk management.
Yes, it is.
Organization. Okay. So you can tell them, this is a potential risk, same as I'm supposed to take care of you as my client, in order for you not to, get a penalty or do something that's not exactly appropriate. I should also advise on these risks. If you are a lawyer that works as a professor, or if you work in academia, it is not something that you can just say, well, it's about now criminal law and family law. And no, now or before it used to be like environmental law. No, this is something now that's, across all of the subjects. So if you're a professor at a university teaching students of the law, then that's something that will impact you. And then, of course, if you work for the government, that's even larger. Perhaps you have a little bit more responsibility if you work for a government agency.
So what's your biggest challenge right now working in ESG?
I believe that the challenge right now is for organizations and individuals to understand the law as an enabler, as an opportunity, rather than something that can hinder. I do think that there should be transition periods. Like, for example, right now with CSDDD, the regulation has changed a bit regarding how organizations should comply with the omnibus. But that is, it's relevant, right? There was a section of business, right, that felt as if, perhaps the burden was a little bit harder. So yeah, okay, let's transition. Let's see where is it exactly that we should go. Not all companies should have a B Corp certification, right? Some don't. But it's great for some of them to have it, right? Now, not all business models can be social value companies or benefit corporations, but the ones that are catering for a specific consumer that values on that. Now, all of that is again, a black and white screen, no longer paper, right? Everything's a screen, digital signature. It's a black and white text somewhere, and and allowing allowing decision makers to understand that lawyers can enable this through a informed opinion it's more of a opportunity, but it also becomes a challenge because mostly you call your lawyer when it's like, oh my God, trouble, let's call them. And that I think we're sometimes called too late in the conversation, where we're more like, firefighters rather than professionals that can help you achieve something faster.
Yeah, and to be called in earlier is you get an opportunity to help inform and shape a decision rather than getting called in after the fact and then just having to defend the decision that was made. Lawyers, I think, have a much more effective role to play early in the game. So tell me what is in store for ESG for 2025?
Well, we're talking today, Monday, March 17th. And there are so many geopolitical changes happening right now, Pamela. And I think the world is observing because everything has shifted massively, in a very short period of time. So I think that anyone that would be, bold enough to say this is what's going to happen, it's not really observing. Okay. Right now, you need to observe. You need to observe what's going on with all of the challenges around diversity and inclusion in the United States. And why do I bring this up and the United States? Because the United States is the world's #1 economy. So the decisions that the United States government takes, they do cascade down quite strongly across the world. Same, the US has also moved far away from, FCPA and other on some of these regulations. So being the actor that the US government is in the global geopolitical arena, the decisions that they take count, right? So I think I'm trying to understand how 2025 will look like. It's still, there are a lot of things that are now being dealt in court in the United States, and we still don't know what will happen. So why do I bring it up? Not only because, the United States is such a huge actor, but because the largest companies in the world are US companies. And these companies cascade down their policies, how they take decisions, what they view as fiduciary duty regarding the decisions that they take, through a lens of being an American company. And since that is not a clear picture, I think it's hard to actually predict on this. Now, you can get a little bit more stability from the European Union. That's different. But the European Union is it's still, altogether, let's say, the third largest economy in the world. You still have the United States #1, and then China. And then China, they have been doing a lot of efforts because before China was a little bit far away, from even human rights or all these things. But now they're also trying to keep up, and they're lobbying for important, positive ESG related regulations. But all of this is, again, like in the beginning of my answer, something that you should observe right now and observe carefully. Like, don't get your update once a week. Check, by noon, and then by the end of the day.
Almost hourly, things are evolving. So when we talk a year from now, what are your predictions with respect to what will have changed?
I believe that there will be more clarity. That's #1. And then when you're talking about the law, clarity is at the heart of it. Okay, you need to know where you stand, because this is not about, I think, I can, bake a cake the way I want it. The law is about, these are the ingredients for your cake. So you need to understand what are those ingredients. Okay, so I think a year from now, we will have more clarity will bring in more transparency, okay? And this clarity and transparency will allow us to have more data. And this is, the other, like the joke about legal is not sexy, you cannot be sexy without legal. The other one is, we can talk about all of this, but data is king, okay? You can have, the best intentions to report. If you don't have data that, it comes from a reliable source, the quality of the data, it doesn't even enable you to make good decisions, ESG or not, or ESG in the picture or no ESG. So data is king. And then, so we have clarity, we have good data, and we get to transparency. Then eventually, once you have that full picture, wherever you are in the world, because where you are, not even, country-wise, regions within countries, industries, size of organizations, and all of this, then you can get that knowledge, or you can have more clarity on that knowledge, and then apply it to your context, okay? So if data is king, context is queen, right? So they need to go together, right? So it's how you interpret the data, and then, where the data comes from, and that's sort of like marriage, right? Allows you to be able to make the most of ESG as an opportunity for your organization, okay? Because you can just decide, how can I apply this? Or what are the risks that I'm willing to take if I decide not to apply it?
Okay, so in the few minutes we have left, I would love to hear from you in these challenging times that you just touched on, with everything changing so rapidly. What gives you hope?
My colleagues give me hope.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear.
Yes.
Tell me more.
Because I can always pick up the phone and talk to a colleague that has a similar challenge to mine, and they are willing to figure it out along with me. And in times of uncertainty, to be able to pick someone else's brain and to know that they have the willingness and the care for this subject to be able to figure it out with you is just more than hopeful. It's heartwarming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful description. Your colleagues should feel very grateful that you feel that way, and probably they feel that way about you as well.
I think we all try to help each other, and we're all together.
I mentioned this at the beginning, but I'm looking forward to hearing more from you next week at the Legal ESG Latin American Summit, where we will gather the legal profession together to talk about some of these exact issues that you touched on today. You're going to serve on a panel that's going to focus on ESG and supply chain contracts. Do you want to give us a quick highlight of that session before we wrap it up?
Sure. I don't know if the moderator will like me to share on some insights, but it is a panel that has professionals from different countries and different backgrounds talking about about the challenge and the opportunity that ESG compliance across the value chain represents. Two perhaps key takeaways that I would like listeners, our participants of the summit, to take away. And then the first one is that the value chain has the potential to create systemic change, okay? Mm-hmm. And we are responsible on how we handle our value chain and how we foster change within the value chain. How do we value it? It is something that can definitely pull us all together globally, right? So that's number one. And then because it has that potential, and because it is so relevant, because it relates all of the moving pieces within what companies deliver to clients, being it products or services, being able to understand properly what ESG compliance means for your value chain is key. Okay, it's not only about understanding the regulation. You can have amazing lawyers help you with that. But then once you go in-house and it's about your procurement department or your board of directors making decisions or understanding how you want to enable your policy, then that's about the company understanding how that can add value to them.
Well, that's a great precursor. And for those who haven't yet registered, there is still time to register. We're going to publish this podcast later this week. And the Legal ESG Latin America event is going to take place on Wednesday, the 26th of March. So thank you so much for your insights today, Paola. I'm sure our audience is really enjoying this conversation, and I look forward to seeing you next week at the event.
Thank you for inviting me, Pamela. I hope that everyone has an amazing, amazing week, and hopefully they can join the summit because there will be different voices with different opinions, and that's always very nurturing.
Wonderful. I'll see you there. Thank you.